Hi, I'm Levi from the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Singapore. My role in URA is to lead my team of architects and planners working on master plan and urban design projects, developing proposals to see how we can, find different strategies and ways to shape Singapore to be a great city to live, work, and play in. Right. Singapore is a young nation. I mean, next year, 2025, we celebrate 60-year, independence. So as a nation, we have grown quite a lot, in order to accommodate the different users. Having a limited land area of only about 730 square kilometer, and to accommodate a population of 5.92 million people. So there is a lot we will need to do in order to house that kind of density. So the planning will, in a way, take a long-term horizon, looking at long-term plan, and then cascade it down to master plan, which is reviewed every 5 years. So within this different time period, we look at the different ways of how the precinct can be developed into self-sufficient, sustainable neighborhoods, that will incorporate all the different users and needs of the different community. So it depends on the precinct. Of course, in the downtown, the city center, the density will be a lot denser because that's where we also have our financial, the commercial belts and so forth. So those are in the range. It could range from plot ratio 3.5 all the way up to even 25. Right, and we also adopt what we call a polycentric city structure plan. So outside the city center, we take conscious effort to plant and grow all these regional and sub-regional centers. So these again will take on a different range of plot ratio, range from 2.1 all the way up to 5 or 6 plot ratio. In between these different growth nodes, that's where we also have the whole range of different types of housing. Again, we want to cater to the diverse needs and aspiration of different population sector. So we have the low-rise housing that would be like 2 to 3 story. Those are called landed. Medium density would be say 10, 15, up to 25. Some of the public housing and private housing developments could be all the way up to say 40 stories. And overall, if you look at the island, the fiscal model of the whole Singapore, realize that, okay, it's not as dense as people perceive it to be, but because we also plan for a whole series of network of parks, open spaces to create that kind of relief and sense of respite for the local residents. It is, of course, like many cities, to accommodate density is one of our key challenges. And not just housing, because we are also a city-state, so to plan for the nation needs, whether it's water, defense, park and nature, commerce, culture, all this take up land needs. So we do face a lot of pressure from the different sectors of the population, and which is why we work very closely with our partnering agencies, looking from the economic point of view, what is the demographics, what is our needs as a nation, and then we then cascade and work it through the different iterations of the plan and allocate the right kind of location for the right users. Singapore, not so much change, but I think defense is always a key pillar in planning the nation needs. Land is set aside for some of these defense training ground. We also have training needs outside beyond Singapore. I mean, with a lot of this collaboration and partnership with other countries and cities. Within Singapore, I guess the land needs are important to us, so we do kind of go through quite a vigorous review on what would each piece of land be used for, and that is reviewed very regularly depending on the demand of our projected needs, and we will then rezone and draw up master plan and urban design plans for the different districts. My team works on urban design projects outside the city. Right, so because it's a small team, we do place more emphasis on some of these key growth nodes. So those areas, of course, me and my team will know kind of more about and putting in more efforts to plan. But in general, we do have a set of what we call development control guidelines to look at all developments across Singapore in terms of building height, connectivity, how it's planned to be, to have good proximity to parks and open spaces. All these are also done in collaboration with the planners, and it's a very concerted effort, both from us as planners, architects, urban designers, and working in partnership with the private sector and developers. So URA, our mission statement is called, is to make Singapore a great city to live, work, and play. So that, I think, to us is something that we hold dear to. So whether it's in terms of island-wide strategies, all the way down to building level kind of urban design guidelines, when we do take that into consideration to see how the building will plug in, to serve the needs, whether it's office, for residential, or even for people to come and use the space. So this will cascade into the different design guidance that we work and give to the architects and developers. We do take the strategies at different levels. So for example, let's say as example on greenery, right? On the island-wide scale, we consciously plan for a kind of a good spread of parks and open spaces at different locations. So after planning it and providing for it, we then also plan for the network to make sure they are connected. So literally, the residents can walk from park to park, coast to coast, in a way, enjoying more than what, they have in their immediate vicinity. So on the precinct and on the building level, that's where we also pay closer attention to the public realm. So in addition to the parks and open spaces, for buildings, we also encourage building owners to provide privately owned public spaces. So that kind of, extend that sense of that public realm into the developments. In addition to the ground floor, we have also put in policies to guide them to provide elevated public space. This could be in the form of sky terraces, roof gardens, and balconies, and so forth. So in a way, that also doubles up as publicly accessible spaces to give us a greater relief, to kind of mitigate the pressure of the density. Accessibility is key. A lot of these precincts that we worked on, beyond 15 minutes, we are focusing on that last mile connection. In terms of proximity to parks, public transport, amenities is something that we place a lot of emphasis on. In URA, we have employed a good set of analytical tools, to look at, having more evidence-based planning. So looking at really demographics, projection, what are the amenities that they will need, looking at the walkability, and then, if there are gaps, we will then consciously find ways to close the gap. If there's a vacant piece of land, that's where we would then kind of plan on what this land could cater and provide for the community. And a lot of these projects will, in a way, have that design brief formulated because of, after doing a lot of these analysis. I guess over the years, we have also sharpened and learned the different ways to improve the way we design and we do planning. And also, of course, all this exchange with different cities also give us a good insights of how different cities are doing it. And in a way, for us, we extract and we learn, what is suitable for our context. So I think in the recent years, this idea to tack on technology and the digitalization efforts is definitely a key driver in improving and enhancing the way we do design. Even for urban design, tools like environmental modeling, looking at how the wind flow is kind of envisioned to flow through the precinct, all this become added tools, and so our urban design guidelines have become more expanded in getting more sharpened, I guess, to see how some of these outcomes could be kind of shaped through some of these guidelines. We do. In fact, URA has amassed the complete digital model of the whole of Singapore. Of course, in various degrees. Some are more kind of broad massing models. We use it for very kind of a precinct level kind of analytics. For some districts, we have very detailed digital model. We call it level 3, in terms of level details. You can see like the ground, where is the shrub, where's the trees, what's the level differences between the building and the street. So we use it as a way to have a lot more deliberation about what would be the kind of design guidance we would give to the developer and have that dialogue, right? The developer also want to see how their project are cited within the larger precinct. So it is often a very useful tool for us to have that dialogue and conversation. Yes. So, so as and when we also require the developers and architects for projects more than 5,000 square meters, they are required to submit a digital model. So when that project comes in, we kind of plug into our digital model as a precinct, and we use it to kind of look at some of this analysis of how the buildings, whether it will fit in, what needs to be tweaked, and after the project's approved, that model gets incorporated into and lay onto the existing model. So it is as much as you can to kind of close the loop in maintaining the digital model. This use of digital model is, I guess, in the early years. I think I'm quite sure the same question asked next year and 2 years now it will be very different. As a planning, we use it very actively. I think some building owners they have begun to use it as a facilities management tool, looking at energy saving, collecting some of this additional data that will help in the operational needs of the building. URA is embarking on efforts to see how some of this effort could be scaled to a precinct level, so that in a way that helps to give a kind of a broader overview for some of this precinct level kind of management and monitoring, which we are piloting. I think for some of this upcoming precinct that we are planning, this will be one of those key overlays that we work on for some of these precincts. It is very integral. I think infrastructure in terms of transport, in terms of water, in terms of let's say waste, right, transport. So all this infrastructure are kind of built into I would say, the skeletal framework, the backbone of how we plan some of this precinct. For example, for transport, the mass rapid transit, we call it the MRT lines. When we plan for it, it's planned, of course, according to where we envision the growth would be. For example, along these key nodes. And when the stations are being planned, we then look at the density, how much it will cater for. If let's say there's a plot of empty land, the station will go through it, and we will guide the station box to be loaded such that in the future, when the site is ready to be launched as a sales site, that plot with the station below can indeed take the kind of loading on top. So all this takes upfront planning. That's where we have to work across very kind of going through the process, working with National Parks Board, Land Transport, all the different agencies to make sure some of this infrastructure are put up front before the development is even individual buildings are being sold through the land sales program. Every 5 years we rezoned, or not say rezone, we review the zoning, the master plan, right down to every plot, looking at zoning, use, and building height and so forth, and all the different overlays. Since the pandemic, we do recognize that needs of the community would need to be kind of catered for to accommodate changes, right? So this idea of having flexibility is important. So even while we zone each plot to have a certain specific use, I think the idea that it should be, able to accommodate changes is important. So there are some of these additional schemes, if they were to come in, they want to change their land use, they want to go higher, that's where we have that dialogue and see, if it's a better product, we will go through the different rezoning and kind of allow that to happen. Of course, in return, we hope that some of these projects will then make that greater contribution to the public, whether it's the provision of, let's say, public space, civic and community use like a library, the childcare, all this become add-on contributions that the developer and the architect could then make to the precinct. I think since COVID, the last recent years, we have seen quite a fair bit of request to review some of these projects, because they also recognize that patterns have changed, pure office may not be something that they would want to continue, and therefore they want to look at a different mix of users, and I think that's where some of these conversations are important. I think it varies. Some of the firms that I know have kind of returned back to so-called pre-COVID, come to office, on a regular basis. Some of the firms do practice flexibility. So you do begin to see some of the shift in the mobility patterns. And also from the traffic perspective, it does make sense because it would then spread out the peak load and help then ease the commuting hours for many. It is interesting. I think we have also heard anecdotal stories about how nowadays Thursdays are becoming the new Fridays, right? And it is interesting. I think we adopt kind of the flexibility to see how the different lifestyle will kind of change. From the planning perspective, I think the idea of flexibility is important. So even during the COVID days, we had planned for a lot of these key growth areas, those centers outside the city center to accommodate all this additional working space, whether it's for co-live or co-work, just to kind of give it the extra provision to allow and give the people that choice of whether they should want to come into the city or they prefer to work near their homes. Majority of Singaporeans stay in public housing, right? 78-80% of us do that. Of course, there's always the demand. I think in the recent announcement for 2021 to 2025, I think the projection is to have 100,000 built-to-order flats, of which now we are into the third year. I think about over 63,000 are kind of committed and being built, and then another 19 coming on. So we are kind of working hard to meet the targets. I think what's also important is to ensure that these locations, these housing are at the right location. So having a spread, across different parts of the island is important, just to give people the choice of where they want to stay, and also as well as in the city center. City center is not really only for the expensive private housing, but the idea to introduce public housing within the city is also a key strategy that we adopt, just to kind of give it really a good spread and for housing. So the spectrum is quite wide. There are different types of, even when we say public housing, there's the one-room rental all the way up to, like, let's say the 5-room flats, for the bigger families. So it depends, for a couple who just got married, just 2%, they were likely to apply for the public housing, maybe a 3 to 4 room, 3-room or 4-room flat, and for that depends on their income level, because most are starting young, right? As a young family, so most of the time they are able to apply for a good subsidized rate that's directly offered by the Housing Development Board, and for that is usually affordable. There's a lot of grants available, whether it's like first time homeowners, or they want to stay near their parents, like myself, I make use of the incentive scheme because I want to stay near my parents. So we do have a lot of these schemes to make it very affordable. And it's not an upfront payment, so we can also stretch the payment over, say, the next 10 to 15 years. We draw upon it and be funded by what we call the CPF scheme, which is equivalent to the pension, but basically it's the employer's contribution towards your salary, right? So we take that from that account and we use it to pay for the monthly payment. So it makes it really not as taxing, especially for the young adults. We understand, to set up a family, there's a lot of these needs for the community. So there are different, the whole spectrum, right? Maybe I'll start from the upstream. We do recognize that it is important to get a good architect, a good design upfront, right? It's rather hard to try to do it downstream. So even when we sell sites, we look at the, other than the usual way of selling to the highest bidder, right? For some of these strategic sites, we practice what we call concept and price. We will look at the developer will submit 2 envelopes, one with the design and one with the price. So we first look at the design and say, okay, of let's say the 10 submissions, we shortlist those that will meet the minimum design criteria, right? So that would help us weed out the not so good schemes, right? So within that good shortlisted pool of design, then we open up the second envelope, and from there we can say, okay, maybe out of this pool we can award the kind of the highest bid of that shortlisted good design scheme. So in a way that gives us one of the ways to at least ensure the developer get a good architect, have a good submission, and that scheme will eventually win the bid. In the process of doing design application, that's where we, for most projects, for some projects, we will set up design review panel, DAP, design advisory panel, where we have that dialogue, a peer dialogue. We will invite, good architects from the design community, sit on it together with Yori to have that peer dialogue with the architects and developers. And often that conversation is important and is useful because that's where we really get down to looking at plans, making the tweaks, and ensuring that the project is designed, that fulfill the design intent to be a good project for the precinct. And I guess, through that feedback loop, a lot of these projects are being then kind of looked at, and eventually, because we also give the planning approval, so that kind of close the loop. And for us, it is one of the ways to kind of get that kind of design quality. Of course, not just for these sites, across all other projects, as much as we can, we also issue a set of development control guidelines as well as urban design guidelines to look at different guiding principles, whether it's to mitigate let's say traffic impact. We look at connectivity between buildings, even how they should not have abrupt change from their covered walkway to the street, so that it's easy for people to move through. Like the amount of covered walkway, make sure they're connected. When the rain comes, ideally you can walk under shelter from your bus stop, from the station to the development. So all these are part of the urban design kind of guidelines that we kind of issue, and we would look through each of these projects to ensure that they will comply with some of these guidelines. Yes, often we do have, after some of these sessions, we will have the architects coming to us say, yes, thank you for speaking out and prompting them ways in which they could retain their design intent, right? And by not removing some of these design features that could perhaps even be value engineered away, right? Because I'm quite sure at different stages of the project that VE process will take place. So this kind of dialogue is helpful to make sure that the design intent is maintained, and through some of these conversations. As part of the process, we do want to consult, and it is an important part. Going forward, public consultation definitely is key, and in that we look at the whole spectrum of how we will consult. Upstream from the planning, urban design, every time before we launch the development plan for a precinct, that's where a lot of this consultation will happen, either through exhibitions, focus group, consulting the experts, all this, and also the interest group. Let's say whether it's the nature to the sports enthusiasts, they give us a good insights on how we can plan and improve the proposal that we have for each of these areas. When it comes down to very specific zoning change, that's where a lot of this public consultation will happen. And that is in part of the due process and due diligence we would do as part of the zoning regulatory framework. Of course, recent years, we have also started to kind of embrace more sectors, right? Whether it's with the designers, the architects, or even the students. So a lot of these ideas and feedback are also through, let's say, design ideas competition or design competition, whereby we get some of these architects to submit their proposal for a lot of these public ground improvement works and so forth. In some of the sales sites that we do, in fact, for sales site as a general requirement, we also do require the developer to in a way, publicize their project, with the local community. Some developers are proactive. They will even organize, some of the stakeholders discussion, talking to the existing community, the shop owners, on how they think they could work on some of these place-making effort for the precinct. So it is encouraging to know that the developers, the new kid on the block is making the effort to engage the local community. I would say the policy, we call it LUSH, which stands for Landscape for Urban Spaces and High-Rise, as a policy that we require this 100% landscape replacement area. It is one of those few policies that really help us to kind of prompted the whole wave of architectural design that responds to the guidelines, not just about fulfilling the quantum in providing that different levels of sky terraces and gardens, but it really kind of also prompted the whole conversation of how can we design high-rise that incorporates, this abundance of greenery, natural ventilated spaces, so that it's not the usual kind of inward-looking, curtain kind of glass up skyscrapers. So to us, that to me is a very interesting building topology. So for equivalent site area, as they redevelop the building, they have to replace the equivalent of a site area into the various elevated public space. So this could take in the form of roof gardens, sky terraces, balconies, punter boxes, and we will compute the amount of hardscape, meaning pavement, hard surfaces, as well as the softscape, which is, areas that they plant, they set aside for shrubs, trees, and so forth. So when the submission come in, it is quite a lot of work, because we even looked at the amount of soil depth, right? Because we know that for a tree to grow, minimally it has to have at least a 1.5 meter soil depth. Otherwise, the tree just not going to survive. So down to how the architect would design that sky terraces, to meet the needs, to make sure that it will be a thriving, nicely landscaped garden. So yeah, that is in short. For just to also add on, so this to us is a requirement, but in return, we also give them is exempted from floor area computation. So if let's say this is a sky terrace, if they comply with the 45 degrees because it allows good sunlight through, it's naturally ventilated. So that amount of floor space is exempted from the floor area computation. So for the developer, it's a win-win, right? They create a very nice, nicely landscaped public spaces. At the same time, they can also use this equivalent floor area for other users that they may choose to, whether it's office or residential units. So for a lot of these mixed-use developments, it is publicly accessible to the public. For some of these projects that is quite specific, let's say you have the office, right? Then we say, okay, for some of these sky terraces, it will be communally accessible by the occupants of that particular building type. So it kind of ranges across, but I think the spirit is it should be communally accessible.
When was the policy introduced?
Oh wow, I would say the good more than 10 years ago. Right now it is into the 3rd edition. We're going to have the 4th review going on that is going to take place. Yes. Yeah, by now it has more than a couple of 100 of hectares of sky terraces facilitated and enabled through the policy. In addition to the sky terrace, we also have the privately owned public spaces. So that, focus on the street level, right? So these will add on and contribute to that whole extended realm, because these privately owned public spaces would, in a way, make the ground more porous. That itself, again, is an incentive policy scheme. For that, if they provide enough seating, level of care to make it a very conducive public space, that's where we also give them the floor area exemption. And that kind of helped the building to really have a very porous and friendly first story. Yes, one key areas will be coastal resilience, right? Singapore is an island, right? So that's a real concern, a real need. So we are working across with the different agencies to see how that would be kind of managed in the near term and also in the longer term. So right now, the team of planners, architects, they're looking at different stretches, and I think different coastline for Singapore would take on different approach. So for example, on the southern, we call it the Long Island, as we look at their coastal measures, it also helps us to give us the opportunity to create extra land. So as we reclaimed, we are talking about how to really reclaim the land, in what configuration, could it also become a way in which we hold and create additional water bodies for us to supplement our water supply. At the same time, the way that this infrastructure are put in would be how we can then look at the different kind of seawall conditions, and that will help us to design what would be the future land profile would be. Of course, at the same time, we have to be mindful about the existing use, what will be the future, where is that new coastline, how will people enjoy the waterfront. So it's all kind of quite interwoven into this whole design exercise, both on the design, also the infrastructure and the kind of the technology that's involved to look at it. Oh yes. This is we are planning for many generations to come. Just as an example, right? The whole Marina Bay that you see today is reclaimed in the 1970s, and even then, now we are in 2024. The land, you can see there's still a lot of vacant land, and we progressively kind of time and look at the phase of development, and kind of plan with the master plan, but also plan of how the developments will take place. So this whole kind of infrastructure, coastal reclamation planning will take us to, and that will help us to kind of meet the needs of the future generations in terms of land take and also the coastal resilience needs. There are budgets set aside as to when and how we will deploy. It also depends on the phasing of the plan. But I think that's where the different agencies beyond URA, because this is a national agenda, right? Working across with different ministries, different statutory boards, and all working on it with the all aligned goal of how to be do it in the best way possible. I think the approach to do a balanced approach in terms of planning, I think that's important. Not just looking at the national needs, but looking at what the community needs, their aspiration, and to have that balancing approach between the different competing needs. I think that's important. There are so many needs, right? From greenery, heritage, identity, economic growth. So to do that trade-off, to look at it is important, and at the end of the day, is to have a plan that will be adaptable to the future needs, and that will help us to kind of let the plan evolve and grow with the time. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.